Today is May 17th, 2011, and I'm interviewing Rudy Miller for the Oklahoma Oral Histories program at his home in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Rudy, you're a professor emeritus at Oklahoma State University. You taught there for 28 years in the fields of ecology and fish behavior. And during that time, you frequently wove art into your scholarship and research before starting your second career as a wildlife artist. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Gabeli, Czechoslovakia, now Slovakia, 1934. Came to this country with my mother a couple of years later and lived mostly in upstate New York for most of my life. Got all of my education in New York, except for 2 years at Tulane in 56 and 57 when I got a master's at Tulane. I have a bachelor's and PhD from Cornell University, and I served a postdoc year in Holland working with the world-renowned ethologist Gerard Behrens. Behrens had a laboratory in Groningen that was outfitted for studies on fish as well as on all kinds of other animals. And I went there to work with him specifically because of his experience with fish. So I was outfitted with a fairly large laboratory, actually, where I set up numerous tanks with gouramis. These are things like Siamese fighting fish and pearl gouramis, and there are at least 8 species of gouramis that live in mostly Central and Eastern Asia, but extend also a few species into Africa. So I got interested in these animals because of a research project I had done at Cornell for an ethology class, animal behavior class, where my wife and I studied these critters in aquaria set up in our home. And I got so interested in them, I decided I would continue studying them as my major research project over the years. And that pretty much got me going with this group of animals. They're a fascinating bunch that did some really interesting kinds of behavior. Most of them are equipped with an accessory breathing organ that permits them to swim to the surface and pinch off a little air and then mumble it around over this organ, which could absorb oxygen directly. So they were capable of breathing either a normal fish existence, or they could, at times when oxygen got low in the water, they could swim up and pinch off a little air at the top and continue their behavior normally. Mm-hmm. So this was a really interesting and unusual group of fish. It was a fairly large group with many species and several different genera. So they were a varied group, and it seemed like the ideal group in which to study the evolution of behavior. Right. So that's what I've spent my time doing during my life is working on various aspects of the behavior of these creatures and trying to piece together a picture of what their evolution must have been like. And I think I was fairly successful. I've never counted them, but I've probably published 30 papers on their behavior of one aspect of it or another. So there's quite a bit of information that's been generated by the work of myself and my students. I've had more than 40 graduate students here at OSU, and the majority of them have worked on agronomy behavior of one sort or other, though not all of them. I've had people working on birds and other creatures as well. So my function here at the university has been to teach aspects of zoology, mostly pertaining to systematics, that is, the classification of animals, ecology, and evolution. So this is pretty much the niche that I have selected and continued with until my retirement a few years ago. Along the way, I decided that we needed to have a book available for people so they could identify Oklahoma fishes. And in '73, I published, with the help of my graduate student, Henry Robison, The Fishes of Oklahoma. After a few years, this became a little bit outdated, and I had decided I wanted to illustrate the book. So I did 50 paintings for the book, and the second edition contained the paintings. It was a horrendous amount of work, but I think it was worth it because the finished product is really quite attractive and very helpful for people trying to identify sometimes very confusing characteristics in some of our fishes. So that constituted a major part of my work about the last 15 years of my career.
I'd like to come back to that. I was wondering, once you arrived in the States, did you grow up pretty much in Rochester? Is that the case?
I grew up in Rochester, went to college at Cornell for my undergraduate.
What did your mom do for a living?
She was a housewife.
Uh-huh.
She was a little peasant lady from the old country.
And, sometimes our passions and interests show up really early in childhood. I'm wondering if you were able to get into nature or you were exploring art at an early age.
I was kind of lucky. I joined a Boy Scout troop that had a man, one of the scout leaders, who was also an amateur ornithologist. And when he found out that I liked animals, he kind of took me under his wing and would come every Sunday morning and pick me up, and we'd go out with a group of ornithologists from Rochester and go all around that part of the state to watch birds. So I learned my birds on these excursions with him. But at the same time, I was drawing feverishly all the time. Any chance I had to find some blank paper, I would draw something on it. So it was kind of natural that before too long I was starting to copy photographs of birds, and that sort of led me into that style of illustration.
And your mom was an artist too.
She was an artist too. She had no training, but she had a good eye and was very enthusiastic about it. So she produced a lot of nice work.
Which you still have, so that rubbed off on you a little, I guess,
Yeah,
as well.
I have a little bit of it.
Was school a place that you enjoyed? Was your interest in nature and art nourished in school?
Yeah, it was pretty well. It was. I don't think it had so much to do with the teachers that I had. In fact, some of them seemed terribly ignorant to me because when I tried to get information about these animals that I was so interested in, they didn't really know anything about them. So I was kind of disgusted by that. But they were nice people, and you can't know everything. So I forgave them that.
And you were in a really urban environment, right? Because Rochester was
right
like
in the middle of
the
the city.
third biggest city in the U.S. And
No,
yet
it
you
was-
had this, you had this love for animals and interest. How did you end up at Cornell? Or I think you first took art classes at the Rochester Art Gallery. Is that right?
Yeah, that was. I got several scholarships to attend classes there, and I did that for maybe 7 or 8 years.
Was that the University of Rochester? Was it? Through the
No,
university?
that was the Rochester Museum of Art.
Okay.
They had a program, or programs actually, where they sponsored kids coming in and taking various kinds of art classes. And then there was also the Museum of Natural History there, and they had some programs like that going. So I took a few of those as well. Those were not so much related to art as to nature, but I enjoyed it all. So I went to all those things, and it wasn't long before I knew all the birds of the region, and was starting to study the other animals on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I started fishing somewhere in there, maybe at 10 or 12, and got a book that helped me identify all the fish. So I knew quite a bit about the fish as well as birds and mammals.
So how did you end up at Cornell, and what was going to be your focus when you studied there?
Interestingly, my cousin, who was married to a physician, came to visit us one time when I was in high school, and at that point in time, I wanted to go to Syracuse University, which had a program for game rangers and people of that sort that would work in the field. But this guy was a very strong talker, and he just about talked my father into trying to coax me to get into one of the professions. And since I loved animals so much, the natural profession would be veterinary science. So by the time they left, my career had shifted over into pre-veterinary. Well, when I got to Cornell and I finally got into a class with a lot of pre-vets, which was comparative anatomy, and I found out what a bunch of bloodthirsty, dishonest guys these people were. They would, when they'd put out specimens and they'd put a pin in one place where you had to identify that structure. This was a quiz, pop quiz. When they'd get through with it, they'd move the pin to a different place so that everybody that came after them would get the wrong answer.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, that was just one of their little tricks.
Competitive to the point of being dishonest.
And you know, when I saw that sort of thing, I just didn't want to be associated with those kind of people. And at the same time, I was taking a class in vertebrate natural history where I was learning that you could walk down the hillside behind Furneaux Hall, the conservation building, and turn over rocks and find salamanders and stuff like that. And you could go out into the shallow streams with a 10-foot seine, and here were dozens of different kinds of fishes bouncing and all these colorful things. Well, you've seen the color on them. Right. They're just absolutely gorgeous. And I just decided at that point that, hell, the heck with those guys. I really don't want to be like that. So I switched my major to conservation and decided I'd try something else. At that point, I met Dr. Edward Rainey, who was the ichthyologist at Cornell, and kind of made friends with him. And he found out about my artistic skills, and he started me in on doing illustrations of fishes that he wanted to have figures of for some books he was working on.
Now, were you already in the master's program, or were you still an undergrad?
I was just a sophomore at that time.
Wow.
So he started me on that and kept with me through my graduation and actually guided me toward a master's degree with Royal Sutkus down at Tulane University. So it was kind of a nice, even transition. And I went down to Tulane, and I just loved it there. It was just, I hadn't seen that kind of habitat before.
Kind of Louisiana, sort of marshy swamp habitat.
Marshy, but the rivers were mostly shallow, and you could take a seine in almost any of those rivers, certainly in the right spot in any river, and catch fish that you never knew existed. So it was like, boom, a whole new world opening up for me. And it just, well, it was like flying on a magic carpet. So I was absolutely convinced that I had found what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And actually it turned out to be that way. But this guy, Sutkus, was a youngish man. He was in his early 40s, I think. He had a lot of energy, and he was the kind of guy that come Friday, he'd say, "Hey, why don't we go up to the Atchafalaya and spend a day up there seining?" So we'd pack up his car, often just he and I, but occasionally if it was a bigger project, we'd get some other people too. And we'd drive over to Mississippi and Alabama, occasionally even Florida, and did a lot of seining at night, interestingly, which means you've got to carry your lights with you, and mostly headlamps, that sort of thing. But the only thing I didn't like about it was the fact that every now and then you'd be pushing your way through some weeds on the edge, and all of a sudden some big old thing would come roaring out of there.
Oh my goodness.
Past you. And you never knew whether it was a black snake or water moccasin.
Whoa.
So that was kind of spooky, but that was the only negative part of it. It was.
So you weren't doing any diving necessarily. It was
No.
mainly seining.
No, it was mostly seining.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most efficient way, really, to get samples.
Right.
And that's what we were doing. Filled a whole museum up with samples. Turns out now that people aren't using those fishes very much, and I actually regret having killed so many.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, that was the future for the science. And,
right.
and I had convinced myself that this was a very worthwhile activity. And I just kept on with it until I finished up my degree. Then I had to decide whether to stay there with Sut or to go back to Cornell. And I had decided that I wanted to switch more into behavior. So I went back to Cornell, and Helen and I started working toward degrees there.
Was she also a science?
She taught in the high school down in New Orleans while I was there. But then...
and that's where you met?
No, actually, we had met the summer before at Duke Marine Laboratory, where she was taking a class, and I'd been invited there to a square dance. So it was for me love at first sight and second sight. But she enjoyed teaching down there. But when we went back to Cornell, we lost a baby, and we decided that the best thing at that point would be to have her go back to school. So she did, and she found a good advisor. And to make things a little easier, I talked her into working on the behavior of sunfishes.
And you were pretty much focused then on fishes at that point.
And I was doing mostly field work in the streams, and she was working with fish in aquaria in our apartment. So I helped her set up the aquaria and bring fish in from the field, and she did most of her work observing those fish. So that worked out very well. By the time I had finished my degree and was ready to go to Holland on the postdoc, she was finishing up her degree as well. So it worked out very nicely for us.
So in 1962, you were hired to teach zoology at Oklahoma State University. Was that your first teaching job?
Well, no, I'd been teaching at Tulane and Cornell.
As a graduate teaching assistant?
As a teaching assistant, but that didn't mean anything. I was teaching the same stuff that I taught later as a professor, so it was all teaching top-level zoology to really bright students. Cornell rakes the brains in pretty well.
What did you know about Oklahoma before you came out this way?
The only thing I knew about Oklahoma State was that the guy who had written a book on keys to the fishes of the United States was a professor here, and I knew he had a museum, and that appealed to me because at that point in time, I thought part of being a zoologist was having a museum and building it. So it was kind of attractive to me. But to be sure, the alternate prospects were not very good at that time. It turns out that nobody wants to pay overseas round trip airfare just to get to listen to a prospective employee, and none of them did. But OSU was willing to offer me a 1-year contract with sight unseen.
Coming straight from Holland, in
Yeah.
other words, yeah.
So I decided that the most prudent thing to do would be to take that job, and if I didn't like it, I could always get another one, and if they didn't like me, they would sure bounce me out. But they did make it a temporary assistant professorship, which galled me a little bit, but I took the job anyway and came here and found it was not such a bad place to be.
What were your first impressions of Stillwater?
I don't think you want to know that. we came in from Tulsa on 51, which at that time it seemed like it had barely been paved, but the whole trip across there, it seemed as if farmers were burning the trees off the land so they could, I guess, put in more grass. So it was like driving through an inferno with these smoking bits of trees. And then when we got to the edge of town, they closed the road and detoured us through South Stillwater, which didn't help anything. And we were both of us thinking at that point in time, well, we're going to have to start reading science again and looking up all those jobs.
What was the department like when you first came here, in terms of programs? Or
it was actually a pretty nice department. The department had Roy Jones was not to my mind a really brilliant scientist or anything like that, but he was a pretty good people person, and he seemed to know how to deal with all the different types of people he had to interact with, which was a good thing, because that meant that there could be some peace and quiet in the department. Some of the people were as good as you'd find anywhere, and some of them were maybe not that good, but largely they were competent and they were able to do what had to be done for their positions. So that was good too. I had to teach a couple of freshman courses in the beginning, and I didn't care for that as much, because that to me was it was not much different from just telling somebody to read the textbook and learn this stuff. But I did my best to try to make it interesting, and I think it succeeded fairly well. I didn't have much trouble finding people who wanted to work with me on various kinds of projects, and I quickly picked up graduate students. a man named Troy Doris was a very intelligent mentor at that time. He had a training grant in environmental sciences, and he would share this grant with some of my students at the time and help pay for us to go to scientific meetings around the country, which was a tremendous asset, really. There's no faster way to get a green student inured into the ways of real science than to let him go to a place where science is being done and talked about and argued about, fought over, than to take him to a professional meeting. And most of the time we had a vehicle that we could pack some people and some seines into, so we'd stop at rivers along the way and pile out and go catch some fish and stock them up into the van, and we'd have stuff from all over the country that way. So that was a lot of fun too, and I saw a lot of water those first few years that I wouldn't have seen any other way.
And yeah, that was another question I had about how you got acquainted with Oklahoma's, animals and fish and landscapes. Did Helen go with you sometimes?
Occasionally, but mostly it was me and my graduate students. In the beginning, it was mostly taking classes out. Once I got a few research projects going, then that involved me as well, and sometimes I had to go out to do those. And then I did some environmental impact statements about halfway through my tenure here and started in on that. So I was doing, at that point, I was doing research projects for power plants that were getting ready to be built. This one out here was one. And collecting material. By then I was starting to collect material for my book too. So I was doing a lot of that sort of thing. And as my boys were growing up, I started taking them with me. Geez, they're 45 and 42 now. Just kids then, but they were enthusiastic about it. So we went all over the state collecting fish for any reason we could think of, really. And it was just because I had so many good students, it was just so much fun to be out there with these good kids, bright kids who wanted to learn this stuff. And it was just like pouring syrup into them. They would just take this in, digest it automatically, and with the best of them, the next time we went out, what's that? They'd tell me. Where are we going to look for that? And they'd tell me. So it was the most rewarding kind of teaching that I think I've ever experienced, and I was very good at it. It's you don't get awards for that sort of thing because you don't have 120 kids out there who are all going to vote to give you an award for teaching. But it had its own set of rewards that I wouldn't replace for the world.
Were you doing any artwork simultaneously with that?
Oh, what I was mostly doing early on was abstracts. I don't have many of them because I I gave most of them away, but when I had to do something, I would paint a little abstract or a big abstract and give it to a friend. And then when did I start painting? I started painting again when they initiated the Oklahoma Duck Stamp Contest. That was about 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I entered a painting of a wood duck, a pair of wood ducks, and got second place. So I figured, well, that's not too bad.
That's wonderful.
So I figured maybe I'll do more of that. And then I went into a phase where I was doing a lot of waterfowl painting, and I entered quite a few contests, and I'd be runner-up or third or fourth in a whole bunch of them. I never won any of those contests. A few of them I thought I should have, but that's anybody's opinion. You can like something, or you can like it not quite as much as you like that.
Right.
And that's the way it worked out. So I had lots of stuff around the country, being fairly successful, but never got the big one.
Well, your book, Fishes of Oklahoma, which initially came out in 73, and you mentioned it was a big task. Why did you take on that project?
I don't want to sound corny, but all my life, my parents had kind of talked me into a philosophy of doing things for the right reasons. That if you're capable of making a contribution in some way, that you should do it. And it didn't take me long to realize that the state really needed a book on the fishes, because there was no place where all this information was collected. There's no place even half of the information was collected. It was just scattered out there in papers all over the place. So I just decided that it's time we had a book like that. And I went and this kid, Henry Robinson, very bright kid, really bright, nice kid. He was willing to help me. Initially, he mostly just brought me specimens from the museum and took them back, because that was a lot of the work,
Right.
was back and forth work. And then as we got into it, then I'd assign him a set of keys to write for a group of animals, and gradually involved him more in the actual writing. And finally, all this material that we had been collecting was available to us. We'd gotten the literature all together, so we just sat down in the end and wrote it up. And it was very valuable. They sold a lot of them, but eventually it became clear that because there were some new findings and some reinterpretations of relationships, we decided that we probably ought to do a second edition. And OU Press was amenable to that. And I asked them if they'd like to have some illustrations for it. and when they saw what I could do, they were enthusiastic about it. So I did 50 paintings, which was probably the hardest part of this whole thing.
I counted 65.
65,
Color
okay.
plate illustrations.
Okay, I guess I gave OSU 50 of them.
Right. And they were just gorgeous. What medium did you use?
They were all
Was it
done in acrylic.
Acrylic, okay.
Yeah. It's a medium that I think works best for where you have fine detail. Watercolor gives you the detail, but it doesn't cover as well. So for fish illustrations where I have to say paint one color, here's the scale, and then there are some markings on top of the scale I can do in other colors, and it can work as an opaque. I don't know if you're at all artistic or not, but it's just the ideal medium really for painting
for
fish.
that fine detail. And the other thing that I don't know if this is so or not, but I've fished before, and it seems to me the challenge of painting fish is that their colors are really the brightest in the water, that they're brighter actually than when they're, out in the open air in the sunlight. And I'm wondering how you kind of you definitely captured that color, that appearance almost as if they were in the water.
Well, you have to remember, I spent probably 35 years collecting these things and looking at them and photographing them and actually doing quite a bit of painting of them. I didn't start with the Oklahoma fish paintings. That's just sort of the end of the line in terms of my contact with them. But I have a good eye for things like color and shape. As you might guess, I'm not much of a champion of non-objective art, abstract art. Some of it I like, but a lot of it I just don't understand why they bothered. It's just, it doesn't relate to the world that I know. I have always tried to use my senses to comprehend as much as I could about the nature of the world, understanding geology and its role in shaping the world and helping to manipulate the living elements in the world to create what we experience as a reality, to me is the ultimate challenge. If you don't, the buffalo on the prairie, there's 1,000 stories that you could tell about them, and every one of them helps you to understand better. To reduce something like that to a gray blob on a green background with stars around it or something doesn't make sense to me. The challenge of it all is to find what the nature of reality is. So that's what I've been trying to do all my life. And I've been fortunate in that I've been able to use my art as a means of penetrating those layers, of trying to illustrate how you can see not just surface beauty, but but how that surface is integrated with all the layers underneath, with all the history, all the change that has taken place on this planet. That to me is the biggest challenge of all. So that's what I'm always working on.
I was struck by your preface too. In the first book of Fishes, in which you were pointing out that it was urgent to kind of identify these fish, but also to preserve their habitats. And then in the second preface, you were having to issue the same warning, only this time you were having to say, we didn't protect our watersheds, we didn't protect our rivers and streams, and this is where we are now, still needing to do that.
Yep.
Do you think there's still time to change those approaches?
Oh, there's still time to change. Whether it will have any effect on returning us a little bit to a more ancestral state, I don't know. I'm kind of mixed on that. I feel it's very important to try to do it, and I wish I could convince more people to do it. But the problem is, when you look at these things that we have, there's an awful lot of people that see them as resources. And part of the definition of resource is the word use. And as soon as you introduce the concept of use in your strategy for maintaining an ecosystem or a world, then you've always got this bunch of people that are willing to come in and say, well, we have as much right to that water as you do, and we're going to have a lot of people that are going to go thirsty if we don't get some of your water. So we're going to sue you to make you give us some of this water. And if your sympathy is with people in Dallas or Houston, you can see that as being a potent argument. Well, what's more important, people or grass in a tall grass prairie? And being people, we're most of the time going to opt for that. And I think, and I'm not unsympathetic to that. I think that I've probably been as much of a people person as anyone for most of my life. But when you get to the point where you see ecosystems starting to fail, and you see the nature of the world changing largely for economic reasons, I think you have the right to object to that. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I can understand how other people would have other priorities for these resources, but I can't help but think that in the long run, if we don't try to maintain some sort of stability in this constant changing world, in the end we're going to regret it. So I have kind of a political argument that doesn't seem to be very popular in Oklahoma, where the financial arguments are more potent. So I'm not surprised that the things haven't changed very much. And most of the change has been for the negative, I believe. But
you retired from teaching in 1982, is that correct?
geez, is that long ago? No,
I
think it was
read that, but
I
that
think
may not
it
be
was
correct.
1990.
Okay, in 1990, and then launched another career, began painting professionally. And I'm wondering if you started painting full-time and marketing your work full-time right away, or was it a transition?
Well, I was getting tired. And I think I wanted to lean back and take a little bit of a break. I'd carried 8 to 10 graduate students for 30 years and led every field crew on almost every weekend that I was here. And I think I was getting a little bit burned out. So while I saw this as a potential career, I was actually getting fairly decent money in my retirement benefits. So it wasn't that I had to make a lot of money to live, and I've never, although, this looks pretty nice. It does. It's not luxurious. At least I don't have a lot of things that people would call luxurious. Drive a regular car. Have a good pet. He's just the nicest boy. That was his predecessor, Brandy.
Yes, who's pretty celebrated because he's appeared on a magazine cover.
Yeah, she's a magazine dog. But so I painted a fairly large number of paintings since I retired, but I have not had the goal of becoming an Audubon of Oklahoma or anything like that. I think I probably have the skill to have done it if I'd been willing to devote that kind of time to it. My work has been improving over the years. I've learned to paint in several different techniques.
Are these with acrylic?
Oh, I painted all mediums.
Okay.
Half of the paintings here are oils.
Yeah.
And there are a few watercolors. There are some things that are better in watercolor, but it has never been a medium of my choice. I took a class in
You took several workshops.
You draw with black waxy pencils.
Oh, yeah. Is it Conti crayon?
No. What the hell is that? Oh well, it doesn't matter. Really. But no, I can work in 5 or 6 different mediums.
Yeah. You've mentioned that you've learned to paint in several different techniques. Can you talk about one or two of these?
Well, for the longest time, I had difficulty painting in a completely loose style. That's partly because I have so much reverence for the image.
And that illustration background.
Right, in the illustration background. But with time, you can learn to reduce the detail of your brush strokes.
Rudy, excuse me, would you like some pink lemonade or Coke or something to drink?
I'm okay right now. Thank you, Helen.
And then at that point, you're able to use both highly detailed portions of your image to tell what the precise nature of the subject is, but you're also able to use fuzzier strokes, broader strokes, with just hints of the details, hints of details here. And this ends up letting you do kind of a composite that's neither highly detailed nor abstract. There are not a lot of painters who do that sort of thing. If you go to Monet's work, for example, it's pretty much all the same in terms of technique, because he found what he wanted to do, and that's fine. I love Monet, but then there are other artists equally as renowned whose really loose paintings I just don't like at all. So what I've done is tended to produce images in which I emphasize aspects that I want to show and that I want to use as illustrations of what I think is important in a given image. And that permits me to evolve this sort of bastard image, which is not quite loose and which is not quite detailed. It's a little bit of both. And I think most of the time that's what I end up with. I do have some paintings here that are largely loosely done.
Yeah, we'll take a look at
painting of the road.
A couple
is one
of those at the
but
end.
then these chickens are pretty much highly detailed all the way through. I don't know if either one is more successful than the other, or whether this hybrid imagery is better than either of them. But I'm not sure that it really matters, as long as the image appeals to people, and a lot of them do. I figure I've been successful, so I don't worry too much about calling myself. I call myself a landscape painter and an animal painter, and there's no doubt that I am both of those, but I don't limit myself to a single technique or approach to painting. If anything, I would have to say I'm leaning more toward realism than anything else, but that in itself doesn't say anything. There are some people that think that the most abstract paintings are realism, which I don't. But
Well, you did take a number of workshops with some well-known artists. Which workshop did you find the most valuable and why?
well, I think my very first one with Charles Movalli was one of the best because this was a man that loves to talk, and he talks the whole while he's working on a painting, and then he'll answer any questions you have. And talking to him after the session, you can find out all kinds of things about his art and his background. So he was one of the best, maybe just because he was the first. The one that I think I admire the most, and if I could paint like him, I would, is Clyde Aspavig, who I think is maybe the best landscape painter in the world right now. But, you know, all of the people on that list are superb painters, and we're talking about little tiny distinctions. With Aspavig, it was, I think, one demo he painted that kind of floored me. We were standing on a bridge looking over a stream, and there was a big rock near one side of the stream, and he just said, I'll paint this rock. I couldn't believe it because it's just a rock. I mean, it didn't have any peculiar qualities that looked to me like they'd make for a subject. But the man set up his easel, started painting, and an hour later, here's this most beautiful rock you ever saw in the world. And I was just standing there with my tongue hanging out. So he had to be one of the best. Let's see, who are some of the others?
Well, that sort of gives us an idea. I was wanting to talk to you a bit about your subject matter, which really includes, of course, images of wildlife and things from Oklahoma, but also like the snow leopard, very exotic or somewhat exotic animals. And how important has travel been in terms of researching for your paintings?
Well, I use one as the excuse for the other, I guess. I have always loved to travel. Not now. I've got this lung thing that is kind of keeping me exhausted all the time. So traveling out to a restaurant is a big trip for me now, but I've always loved to travel, and I've done a lot of plein air painting, that is setting up an easel outdoors and painting a sketch, and then later using photographic stuff, adding to it and producing complete works. But I've done some complete works in the field too, and I've done a lot of painting from photographs. I've learned how not to be a prisoner of the photograph, and that made a big difference from when I had to paint every little thing that was there in the picture, to the point of, well, wouldn't this look better if this were over here, or something like that. And that was a big step for me when I was able to free myself from the strictures of essentially copying an image. But what it boils down to really is finding an image that is interesting and that you want to paint, and that speaks to your motives as an artist. And I've told you what my motives are, so they're big enough motives that they can encompass almost anything. And I just, I love nature. I love animals. I love landscapes. I love skies. I especially love water. I do a lot of paintings of water, which is good because I think water is one of the harder things for painters to really figure out. And I've been on water since I was that big. And I've actually been looking at water, trying to understand it, trying to understand the animals in it, what their orientation is like, what happens when a wave comes. All these things are stuff that I've known since I was maybe 12. And so I think my water paintings are among my best. My animals, I can, if you gave me a photograph of any animal, I could put it down on canvas exactly as it is. These days, I think about it first, and I may move it around a little bit. I may alter it a little bit. I may add something or subtract something. And I think most of the changes I make now are positive changes. At least I hope so.
When you do started painting, what exactly is your creative process? From the time you sort of get that idea, or
I'm not sure what a creative process is. I read a lot of stuff in the art magazines about people pontificating about how they have this sudden mental surge that gives them the insight into the nature of this pot or this lump of grass or whatever the hell they're painting. And I think most of the time that is pretentious poppycock. And this may be in part because I'm basically a peasant. Both my parents were working people. All of my ancestors were farmers. I do have one great-grandfather who was a general in the Austrian army, but he's the closest thing to royalty in our family. So I have always had kind of a matter-of-fact view of everything in life. It's not glamorous. It may make people think I'm just a dolt. And who knows, maybe I am just a clever dolt. But I don't want to try to pretend that beautiful swan there is a result of any kind of a brain shock. I saw this gorgeous swan swimming with the sun behind it, and all of a sudden my heart burst and I had to paint that. Well, I found a nice picture of a swan and I thought, geez, that'd make a nice painting. So I painted it. I probably painted that swan in different colors and different shapes and moods 8 or 9 times. and that's the only one I've got left, and that's a print. So it was a fairly
Other people have
successful
thought it was a
swan,
nice one.
but he was not the result of some kind of burst of genius finally forcing itself to the fore. It's the kind of thing that when I see something that I think is beautiful, I'll suddenly want to paint it. Now, I don't think that raccoon is beautiful, but he's certainly very cute. And I hadn't painted a raccoon in many years, so I thought, hey, I've got a great picture of a raccoon here. Why not do a painting of that raccoon? This is not the world's most beautiful picture of a landscape, but it was a stream in Iceland that Helen had walked beside and photographed, going over the hillside full of auks and razorbacks and all kinds of seabirds on nests. She was there, but she took this long away, and I thought, well, this will remind her of that place.
I actually like that very much and would like to maybe have you, talk about it a little bit. It's a nice loose piece.
I can't talk about it because this is one of the few that I actually know nothing about.
Since you weren't there, you didn't have that experience.
There, but it was interesting enough that I thought, well, it is. There's a lot of nice shapes in it, a lot of nice angles. There's not a straight line in it, but it's got all the stuff that I like. It's got water, it's got rocks. There's a little sand beach on the side there, mountain rising in the rear, and I can just imagine what's on the other side of that hill there. All these burrows and dens and nests of all these lovely little sea creatures.
You know, I understand that in your wildlife images, you're often drawn to paint the female of the species, and they sometimes aren't as colorful as the males. And
right.
Any thoughts about that?
Well, the reason that I've gone that way, like my mama's here, the mama elks there's no male there. There is a male there, but he's up above them, and he's been driving them along this path around this big hill. And when the sun hit the ice and water on the tips of those plants, and it lit up kind of magically, I decided that I'm going to paint these gals the way they look. Here's a bunch of female and juvenile elk that are being driven by a dominant male who everybody loves to paint with those big, huge antlers. But they're looking, if you look at their faces, they're complacent, they're calm, they're patient, they're not afraid, they're, in all respects, they're about as happy and pleasant as you could ask an animal to be. And here they are being driven around the side of this big hill, just calm as anything. And to me, that's kind of a symbol of an inner state in those animals that is what I admire. I don't have anything against a big old bull and his antlers, and I could sell 5 of them for every one of these that I could sell. And I realize that, but it's, I think maybe it's kind of my commitment to balance out the representation of nature as being not just the spectacular big old males, but also the calm peaceful, beautiful females. So it's just one for the girls.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Cindy, Cory. What has been one of the highlights of your artistic career?
Well, I guess one, I would have to say that show that the Oklahoma Museum of Art put on, where they showed all my fish paintings, had to be one of the highlights.
Because it's so nice to see that big body of work.
Yeah, it was all there. And quite a few people came to see it and seemed to enjoy seeing all those critters. So that was kind of nice. I've enjoyed exhibiting at various venues across the country. It's hard to pick out one over the other of those because they're all fairly similar.
Have there been any feedback or comments from collectors or just people viewing your work that stand out for you?
Oh, for one reason or other, most people are quite complimentary, and I suspect they're being honest about it. They do like the work. I mean, what's not to like about a kitty cat? I don't have crowds of people rushing in to see my work or to buy it. I'll sell a few paintings every year. When I opened a little art gallery downtown 15, 20 years ago, I sold a bunch of paintings there in about 6 months. So I think if I wanted to go to the trouble of setting up a venue of that sort, I probably could make it pay for itself, if not make a little profit. But again, I guess I've not I think to make something like that work, you've got to have a little bit of fire in your belly. You've got to really want to succeed at something, and whether it's justified or not, I have the feeling that I am a success, that the quality of my work is good enough that I don't need to have a lot of feedback, encouragement of either financial or vocal support. I suppose that could be interpreted as complacency, and maybe it is. I don't know.
Maybe you're just more interested in painting right now.
Well, I've always kind of felt that way. I never did want to spend the time that it would take to run a gallery or even to run a sales unit out of this house. Helen was never interested in doing that, and when she wasn't, I decided that I didn't want to do it either. A lot of successful artists have their spouses working very, very hard to push them, to promote them, to help in sales, to make sure that people know about this work. And I've never felt like I wanted to ask Helen to do that. She's got her own career. She's writing 2 books right now, and it wouldn't be fair to ask her to do something like that, and I never have.
Are they scientific
Yeah,
books?
they're environment books.
Oh, wonderful.
One a popular one, and one of them a textbook for an environmental science course.
Well, I know one of your desires was to make the world a more beautiful place, and you've definitely done that. Is there anything else we should cover before we take a look at a couple of your paintings? Anything we forgot to talk about?
No, I don't think so.
Well, let's start with the paintings that you were sort of explaining as we were talking, and I'm just going to kind of refocus on them quickly, and then
Okay.
we'll take a look at some others. And I'm just going to hit the pause here while I. So this is the landscape of Iceland that you were talking about previously, right. And that Helen took the picture for. And now I'm going to go ahead and refocus on the female elk up here.
We call that the mamas.
The mamas. I love the title. And humor seems to be pretty important in your titles and your subject matter sometimes.
Well, yeah, kind of dry humor.
This particular painting is an oil, and what's the title?
You know, I'm not sure I ever gave that painting a title. That's it's one of the small hawks that actually feeds on birds. And this one has caught a bird and is holding it in his claws.
If I can get in closer, yeah, you can see.
And he's
yes.
looking off to the side. That tree limb is fairly large, but I would guess that the tree limb itself is only about 15 inches in diameter, so that makes it about the same size as the bird. These little guys flit around in the trees looking for birds that they can catch, and then they'll move to a perch like this one and pop off the feathers and then eventually feed on the mussels. Within them. Okay. It's an essentially important element in most woods of this sort. This one was down in Texas, Panhandle, Texas, on one of our trips down there.
Okay, would you like to talk about this piece for us?
Well, this is an orange-spotted sunfish. It's one of the smaller sunfishes. Almost all of them limited to North America. There's a few that make it down a little way south, not much. This is probably the smallest of Oklahoma sunfishes. It's actually rarely much bigger than about 3 inches. So this guy feeds primarily on small insects and insect larvae and other tiny animals and larger plankton. But they're found almost all over Oklahoma, and it has always been one of my favorite fishes, just because it's such a spectacular little thing.
Yeah, the shape and the coloring, just absolutely wonderful. Well, Rudy, thank you very much for your time today. Thank
Well,
you
you're
for
welcome.